Okay, I'm gonna get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to LiveMove Speaker Series event today, Houston, the Misconceptions, the Facts, and Future of Transportation. I'm John Larson Friend, the Speaker Series Coordinator for LiveMove, and I'm a second-year master's student in the Community and Regional Planning program at the University of Oregon. So first, we would like to say a thank you to a few organizations for supporting this event: the Sustainable Cities Institute, the National Institute for Transportation and Communities, Better Eugene Springfield Transportation, May is Bike Month Lane County, and the University of Oregon, and specifically the School of Planning, Public Policy, and Management within the University of Oregon. Specifically, we'd also like to thank our faculty advisor, Mark Schlossberg, and our office manager, Marcia Graveson. Just a little background, if you aren't familiar with LiveMove. LiveMove is an organization made up of undergraduate and graduate students at the University of Oregon that works to promote healthy, sustainable communities by integrating transportation and livability through collaboration, education, research, and outreach. We have weekly meetings throughout the year. Each year we do a large by design project and other smaller projects throughout as well. In fact, the new 13th Street Bikeway that opened this year in Eugene was originally a LiveMove by design project done about 7 years ago. Today we'll be hosting a panel with members of the City of Houston's Public Works and Transportation and Drainage Operations Department. We will be hearing from Veronica Davis, the director, Ian Hlavacek, the managing engineer, Lauren Grove, who is a senior staff analyst, and Donald Buaku, principal planner and urban design. I will note that the Q&A chat is open should questions arise. We will definitely have time throughout to take questions from you all. So with that, please welcome our panelists.
Thank you, John, for that warm introduction. My name is Veronica Davis. As John mentioned, I'm the Director of Transportation and Drainage for the City of Houston, and I'm here with three of my staff. So I'm just going to start off with providing a little bit of context about Houston, and then as the boss, I get to put my team on the hot seat and make them answer some of my hard questions and yours as well. So this isn't all that clear, but this is a map of the city of Houston. And for those of you that are able to see visually, what you'll see is we have a lot of gaps within the city. And so part of that is how the city was designed and grew over time. It was largely through annexation, which the portion which is District E in the far northeast corner, that was annexed in the late 90s. So we are a large city. Just for some size context, from a population perspective, we have 2.3 million residents or so within the city of Houston. That is about the same as the entire population of the Portland, Oregon metropolitan region. From a population perspective. From a size perspective, we are also just a physically large city. We are roughly the size of Benton County, Oregon, in terms of square mileage. And so I put that in context because a lot of other cities may have bigger populations or may be denser, but we are a lot of people and a lot of space. So this is the Houston Public Works leadership team. Some of you all will find as you look through your career, if you want to work in Department of Transportations, some cities have Department of Transportations, or it may be called Department of Mobility. That's the new age name for some of the newer cities. But we are within the Department of Public Works. So Director Carol Haddock is over Public Works. I am one of the deputy directors of Public Works, and so I'm the director of Transportation and Drainage. But I should say some of our projects are also done by Capital Projects, which has a different deputy. But you can just see we are a large organization. We're probably one of the largest departments within the city of Houston. And we're an enterprise fund, which largely we bring in money that we spend. We are not a part of the general fund. This is just a sense of the public infrastructure within public works that we're responsible for. For transportation drainage operations, we have the streets, we have the markings, we have all of the pavement, we have the signals, the stormwater system. Right now we have 16,000 lane miles of road. That is roughly the distance from Houston to Tokyo and back, and some extra. We have 3,500 miles of storm sewer and about 3,600 miles of open ditches, which is a little bit different. You won't necessarily see that in all cities. A little bit about how we're funded. As I mentioned, we are an enterprise fund. So a portion of our money comes via Metro, and Metro is our regional transit agency. A portion of our money comes from property tax. And then there's the drainage charge, which it funds a lot of our drainage projects, and then developer impact fees. So we are not a part of the general fund. I don't know what happened to the rest of the slide, but this is our rough org chart. So I am the director. We have two organizations that aren't necessarily part of the city, but those particular positions do report to me. And that's Transtar. That is our basically our large facility that is all of our traffic cameras. It is our emergency operations for the county when there is an emergency, and that is Transtar. So we are 1/4 of the agencies there. The Gulf Coast Rail District, where the region is looking to do commuter rail, and so that executive director position reports to me. And then we have the other pieces, the stormwater operations, as I mentioned, support surface, transportation engineering, and that is where Ian, Lauren, and Donald sit, project delivery, street and bridge maintenance, and traffic operations. One thing to say about our group, it's about 900 employees total, of which about 700 are on the construction side, whether it's filling potholes, doing pavement markings, fixing traffic signals. That is the big bulk of our employees. What guides our work is the Next Day Pothole Program. I know this is the part when I was in planning school, when I was in engineering school, no one ever talked to me about potholes. But what you all will find as you go out into the working world, potholes are a very emotional thing for community members. And a lot of time, as we talk about living and moving and different things like bike infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure, a lot of times people just want the basics met of potholes. So within the city, we do respond to potholes by the next day. This is an extremely important program to the mayor. We literally give him daily reports on all the potholes that have been called in and how we have addressed them. And this is an example. We have a map. If you're really curious, you can go to houstonpotholes.org. So every day this updates. If you were to call in if you were in Houston and you were to call in to 311 now about a pothole, by the time you hang up the phone, it would be populated on this map. But this is what gets monitored daily, and potholes are very important to people. The other thing that guides our work is Resilient Houston. One of the things about Houston is that we are an extremely flat city, and our roads are a part of our storm sewer conveyance system. So basically what that means is that our roads are designed to hold water in rain events in order to protect home properties from getting damaged. I will say that as weather events become more extreme, it does become a lot more challenging. And so when you see the pictures of a heavy rain or hurricane of Houston, generally you will see our roads flooded, but that is what they are designed to do. And what Resilient Houston, what we're looking at is how we live with water differently. As I mentioned, we do have the open ditch system. And so sometimes for members of the public, it causes a little bit of anxiety to just see water ponding in the front of their house. But again, that is what the open ditch system is designed to do. But we are looking at things like green infrastructure and looking at other things around being a resilient a city. And so that's things like other cities of growing up and not growing out. As you can see, as I mentioned, we are a sprawled city, but really doing that infill development if you were to come to Houston, particularly inside of the 610 loop, which is the inner loop that we have, you will see a lot of construction projects where we are building dense housing. What is very common that you'll see are townhomes as we try to densify the inner parts of the city, but also doing this in a way that is equitable, inclusive, and affordable. Our street rehab initiative. So this is where we're looking at pavement condition. We sometimes have people that have jokes that, they can't even have a cup of coffee and drive down the streets of Houston safely. And so we're aiming to change that, but then also making sure we're prioritizing our high injury network. We're prioritizing what we call complete communities. And generally, those are communities that have been historically under-resourced. And so making sure we're putting our resources there with our street rehab initiative. Overall, we aim to rehab 292 miles of street each year. And then lastly, which Lauren will talk about more during the Q&A, is Vision Zero. Many other cities do have Vision Zero plans. For the city of Houston, by 2030, we want no traffic-related deaths or serious injuries. Lauren and her team are taking this extremely seriously and trying to map it out, and so that we can systematically begin to address where we are having issues, particularly in the areas that are complete communities. Not to steal Lauren's thunder, but one of the most interesting things about our high injury network is that 60% of our serious injuries and fatalities are occurring on just 6% of our roadways. And as I mentioned, we have 16,000 lane miles. So we're just beginning to just try to really address that. 52% are occurring in communities that are low income and or have high populations of Black and Brown residents. And so we're just aiming to address that as we address equity. And so I show this picture. Yes, this is Houston. And oftentimes when people think of Houston, this is what they think of. I know that when I lived here in 2005, my biggest impression was like, gosh, there's so many highways and I got to take the highway to get everywhere. So yes, we do have highways, but no, we're not a city of highways. We are aiming, we have a paradigm shift. The mayor has said that he wants to shift the paradigm so that we're not just known as a car-centric city, but we can transform ourselves into something different and something better. And so this is one of our older, what we're calling high comfort bike lanes. And that is, essentially our default. And that is what Ian's team has been working very hard on, of trying to get this type of infrastructure installed around the city. And one of our challenges, as I mentioned, is our maintenance function, is also making sure that as we are installing this type of infrastructure, we're also maintaining this type of infrastructure. We're also a city of trails. This is largely county property, but we work very closely with our county partners. This is an example of our bayous. We are a city of bayous that hold water. And as you can see, in extreme rain events, this does fill up. But when there is an extreme rain events, these become really great paths for people to walk, for people to bike. And so we are working with our county partners, Houston Park Board and others, in order to really create connected networks, and then making sure that our on-street facilities connect to these trails so that people can move around the city. And we do have rail. A lot of people don't know that, some people may not know that Houston has public transit, but we do have rail, and we are working with our partners at Metro to enhance that service through mobility connections to existing bus lines, and then also working to help make the rail work smoother. And that is, looking at dedicated lanes, looking at things like bus-only lanes, and enhancing them as other cities have done with red lanes. And so with that, that is just kind of the context setting for the city of Houston. So if my staff can join me with their cameras on. All right, and so just because how the boxes work, I'm going to start with you, Donald. If you can describe your role with the city of Houston and also talk about why TDO is the greatest service line that has ever existed.
Well, thanks, Veronica. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is great. Thanks, John and team, for setting this up. So TDO is wonderful. I joined the city a little over a year and a half ago, and I joined the city as a principal planner in TDO. And my role was to work with the team to do prioritization, kind of to identify which projects needed to be moved forward in the pipeline. But then my background as an architect and urban designer, I mean, I just couldn't let it go. So I was thinking, how does TDO benefit from urban design? So I started kind of thinking about it, marinating it, talking with people about it, the fact that all of our processes need to have some layer of urban design applied to it. And with that, I mean, we'll hear later on today about how we want to do urban design, but housed in public works, which I think may be a pilot in the nation. So for me, what I do is I'm very early in projects, helping to prioritize them, helping to create a conversation around the goals of it, and helping to kind of move them forward. Sometimes I also serve as a project manager on projects, just to move them forward and ensure that the right people are brought to the table. Several interagencies are also brought to the table, and to make sure that things are just done right from the planning and urban design perspective. I know public works has mostly engineers, but then sometimes it's good to have other voices as well in the room and around the table. So I see that as my role so far and going forward.
Thank you, Donald. Lauren, and you're the newest of all of us to TDO, but just talk about your role in the city and your role in TDO.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me, and excited to be here and talk about what we're doing in Houston. So my title is a senior staff analyst, which really doesn't mean much. So one piece of advice very quickly, if I can, when you're looking at jobs, is to look beyond the title and look at the actual job description and the role and the responsibility, because what I'm charged with here is to help implement the Vision Zero action plan that Veronica mentioned earlier. And it's interesting because prior to this, I was in the planning and development department. So I have a background in urban and regional planning. I got my master's. First job out of grad school was working for the city of Houston in the planning department as a transportation planner. And I got to really help develop the Vision Zero action plan. And so now I'm getting to the next step of helping to implement that plan, which is really exciting. And I think as a planner, we are oftentimes on that first end of making the plan, developing it, and may not always get to see it implemented. And so I feel very passionately about making sure that that happens, that it doesn't just sit on a shelf. So that is a large part of my role, helping specifically with data analysis and design of our streets, including pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. So all of that really just comes into the umbrella of Vision Zero and making sure our streets are safe for everybody.
Great, thank you, Lauren. And last and certainly not least, Ian, tell us what you do, what's your role?
Thank you, Veronica. Not least, that's amazing. And John, I have to give you credit. You nailed the last name. The last name was perfect. I am a managing engineer in Houston Public Works. I oversee a lot of different people, a lot of different groups. A large part of my job is to really try to make the road safe. That's a large part of what we all do here. Lauren, Donald, and of course Veronica. We try to experience the roads ourselves and then try to figure out what decisions need to be made to be able to make them safer for everybody. And I oversee a street light group. And I got to tell you, before I came to the city, I never really thought about street lights before ever. And now that I'm deep into it, I'm realizing street lights play a big role in roadway safety. And it's also a kind of a niche area that not a lot of people know too much about. I oversee our traffic count group, which is also tied to a lot of these kind of conversations too. When Donald's working on some of our bigger picture early infrastructure project plans, we use traffic counts just to give us a baseline for what's out there and what it help us guide in the decisions that we're making. And then I also see a large group of engineering staff that respond to citizen requests. We prepare work orders. We do a lot of work directly with our pavement marking, signage, signal groups, all of which are very kind of infrastructure engineering, but still very tied to, okay, if you're trying to cross the road and the signals are not working right or the signs aren't clear, then that plays a big role. A lot of the safety stuff is not what you would consider to be like the biggest, most interesting things. It's really some of the small stuff that you can really have a lot of bang for your buck on, and we do a lot with that. So we do a lot, Veronica.
I understand. So with that being said, so TDO does a lot. So how do we prioritize projects? And I know you guys are probably like, well, you answer that, boss, but I'm going to put it on you all. You're on the hot seat. How do we prioritize projects, and how should we prioritize projects? Anyone?
Well, maybe I can start a little bit, just because I've been here the longest. I've actually been here the longest out of all of us. And I have sensed, I've been here for almost 7 years now. And in the time that since I came and where I am now, there has been a noticeable shift. And we're coming from a very responsive organization. We will continue to be that. We are working for the residents and the stakeholders of the city of Houston. That will never change. But previously there was much more of we're going to respond to requests as they come in. If somebody lets us know that there's a problem, we'll get out there as fast as we can and try to fix it. And what we're trying to move towards is being more proactive and still dealing with the requests as they come in, but also figuring out how to prioritize those requests that come in. And then how do we prioritize those against any kind of more of a proactive approach to project development and prioritization. So we're kind of in the middle of that, and Lauren and Donald are definitely helping me out. Maybe I'll talk about what
I can jump in a little bit. So I know the infrastructure planning group, I mean, they used to use like the PCI, which is the pavement condition index. And there were also other factors that were, I mean, all of them, I just learned about it when I came here. So those were new to me, but those were kind of technical ways of identifying which streets needed help. And then they would go forward with that, develop a document, and then look at how to improve it. So those were very technical ways of prioritizing. But going forward, Veronica, to your question, I think the big thing we have to use is equity. I think it's a word everyone is throwing around, but Houston is really big, and being able to prioritize, you have to look at those who need it most, or at least bringing everybody to an equilibrium in terms of need and not forgetting anyone. So I think you mentioned the complete communities and the other initiatives by the mayor. I think those will all help such that communities that are really getting the worst of things or situations are prioritized. And for that, for instance, we are doing a study now on resilient sidewalks that is going to zoom into 2 communities that were mostly inundated during Hurricane Harvey, Kashmir Gardens and Gulfton, and to make sure that these communities, the sidewalks in those communities are brought up to standard like other parts of the city. So I think using equity as a big umbrella going forward will help us identify enclaves that need most help in terms of project development.
So Donald, since you brought that up, if you can talk a little bit about more some of the challenges. I think that, and I'm going to let Lauren talk about Vision Zero in a bit, but I think that's one of the challenges, right? We have our right of way and we have Vision Zero, and we can all agree that walking and facilitate people's ability to walk is important. But we also are a city where drainage is a major issue, particularly with our open ditch system. So if you can talk a little bit about, I mean, because I think it's really innovative what we're doing with these resilient sidewalks. And I want to make sure people understand it's not just about having a sidewalk, it's something that works with our drainage system.
Yes, and so I was going to talk about this a little later if we got to it, but working out west versus working here in the south, the difference is water. I mean, out west, they need water. Over here, we have too much water to deal with. And so sidewalks, for instance, I always say this, that I see that sidewalks which are resilient and which are performing well should perform best in the horizontal as well as the vertical. So a good sidewalk performing in the horizontal works with mobility. It gets people to where they need to go. It's connected, there are no breaks. It works for all users, including those in wheelchairs or other form of ADA compliant users. So the sidewalk works. A sidewalk works in the horizontal, but then in the vertical, the sidewalk is part of the drainage system. So the sidewalk contributes to more impervious surfaces. Already we are dealing with drainage issues, and then every new sidewalk is more concrete, more impervious surface. So where do we move that water? The aim is eventually to get water down back into the aquifer, to recharge the aquifer. So our sidewalks, and as much as we are putting them in horizontally to help with mobility, they should contribute to drainage by helping to move water away and back into the aquifer. So the resilient sidewalks is looking at alternative ways, thinking out of the box of what a sidewalk could do. Could a sidewalk be more permeable than what we are doing? Do we even need to have sidewalks as we think about it? Can we rethink sidewalks? So that is a big study that we are doing citywide with the lessons that we learned from those two communities. And it's a plan that is emanated from this Resilient Houston, which is our blueprint that Veronica told you all about. So it's a project that is high on our priority, and fortunately, I'm the PM on it. So I hope to really see it through, and we can get great stuff from it.
I'm looking forward to it. So
Yeah.
Lauren, Vision Zero. So how are we implementing Vision Zero, and what do you see as the challenges and the opportunities?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of ways to answer the implementation question. One of which is, through collaboration and coordination. So internally at the city, that means it doesn't happen in one department, that we need multiple city departments helping us to implement. And then also our partner agencies. So there are a lot of agencies in Houston that are working on transportation. We have our public transit agency, we have our county, we have the state, and then other, businesses and TERS and management districts that are all impacting the streets in some way. And so it's really, implementation absolutely needs that collaborative effort. And so that's one way of how we're doing this, is bringing all those stakeholders together and recognizing the priority actions and saying, this is where we're focusing and we have to do it together. And then this sort of gets to the prioritization of projects, is using data to determine where crash history and community concerns are really coming together and highlighting these are dangerous streets and we need to do something about it. And that's where the high injury network comes into play, is looking at severe crashes, what streets they're happening the most on, and focusing our efforts there on that 6% of streets in Houston, which is still like over 400 miles. So it's still a lot. So we even need to do more prioritization. But just having a focused subset of streets helps us to then, when we have other opportunities to reimagine that street, say, hey, this is on our high injury network, this is a priority for us. And that gets us to more of the proactive approach that Ian talked about, which is really important for Houston to have this strategy that really guides where we focus those resources. And then I think another part that Donald already touched on is equity. So some of our dangerous streets also are in communities that maybe we haven't historically invested in. And so really focusing efforts there. And these efforts are, low cost solutions like restriping. So being able to coordinate with programming that's already happening, but then more transformative efforts as well, and thinking about how we can program this in our CIP. But it really, I think, focuses on, using the data that we have as guiding our priority projects, and that is, crash history and equity, and making sure that those outcomes are equitable as well.
Yeah. So one for all of our participants, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. But in the meantime, Ian, putting you on the hot seat,
What's up, Veronica?
Yeah, so we're getting ready to reopen. I know for the city, you all are back at work, but overall, we're slowly reopening. If you could like look into your magic crystal ball, what does a post-COVID future look like for Houston?
That's a fantastic question. I think what's the post-COVID world look like? And a lot of very much smarter people than me are trying to figure that out. And I don't know if we're going to figure out how it's going to play out. I think a lot of us who have been dealing with transportation planning and engineering for a long time have looked at, we all hear about the need to expand freeways and roads because we have people moving in, jobs, and all this good economic development activity. I mean, Houston has been very blessed in the fact that we have had an extended period of time of economic development. And the answer for a long time for a lot of people is we need more roads and more highways. And but the other side of it is, well, maybe we can do some demand management. Maybe not everybody has to be on the roads and the highways at the same time. Maybe some people can have they can work at different hours, or maybe there's some teleworking and telecommuting options that could be available. And that has been on the table for years. I remember being back in school and we were talking about how these are potential solutions to our air quality problems and our traffic congestion problems. And it was always a wonder of how do we get this implemented on a wide scale? And the conversation never really seemed to move to that point. So this could very well be one of the silver linings of a terrible thing that we've all had to deal with, is that maybe that has finally pushed us to the point where we can look at some of these other options, and we've got a wide dynamic of people who are talking about it now and seeing the benefits. That and so maybe we don't have. I think we're going to settle into a period. My crystal ball is we're going to settle into a period that's going to look a little bit more like what it was before the pandemic. I think we've already seen some of the traffic volumes be restored to previous volumes. The roadways have gotten busier again. I think that we've kind of seen that across probably the world, but definitely within Texas and Houston. But I think longer term, I mean, I think now that people have experienced a different way of living. I know me personally, I've loved to have the ability to telework, but I've kind of hated to do it as much as I've had to do it. And I have a feeling that a lot of people will kind of fall in that category, that they love having options like that, or they like having different kinds of flexible schedules. And then you might have a critical point where more and more people are start asking for it. And then the transportation questions look a lot different at that point. You might even have the same number of people on the roadways, but maybe, hey, they're working at home for a little bit in the morning and they're driving in or taking transit or however, riding bike in during the off peak, like around 10 or 11 in the morning. They stay in the office for a couple hours. It just opens up a world of possibilities that could completely change the dynamic. Long term, I don't know, but it's an exciting time to be right in the middle of it and to see how we can play a role.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question from the audience. So pertaining to the discussion on sidewalks, does Houston have funding mechanisms for building and upgrading sidewalks? What is it? In Eugene, that is a property owner expense, not a public improvement. Do any of you want to tackle this question?
I believe. Oh, you go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, I believe that. Sorry, Ian. I believe that it's this property owners cost, right, Ian?
Yes.
Yeah, with some exceptions.
Yeah. Yes-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's right. And long term, that is usually the answer. That if somebody wants a sidewalk to be fixed in front of their house or their business, it is basically what we have to tell them. That that is. That's the way the laws are written, and I think that's pretty widespread. Y'all are not alone in this. We're not alone in this, and I think a lot of different communities are asking these questions about, hey, we don't ask people to necessarily maintain the pavement in front of their house. Why do we actually ask them to maintain the sidewalk in front of their house? At the same time, we struggle to be able to keep the pavement in front of people's houses in good shape. So to take that on and also be able to maintain the sidewalks, at a bottom line, it becomes a money question. And I think a lot of people here would say that's a valuable question to ask, and let's see if we can find that money to do it. But for the time being, we don't, except for a couple of situations. We do have a couple of sidewalk programs that are very specific pretty narrowly defined. We do have a couple $1 million a year that we dedicate to them, so it's not nothing. So we prioritize some sidewalks primarily for, we have a mayor's office of people with disabilities who really handle different issues related to getting around. If you have mobility issues, it's a wonderful group to work with, but we work with them to help identify where somebody who uses a wheelchair, for example, might be having a hard time getting to a bus stop. Then what we'll do is come in and basically, if we find out, yeah, we don't have a safe way to get you to your destination, we'll find your route and then try to prioritize that to get you a sidewalk there. And we also do have a sidewalks to school program. We have a lot of schools and we have a lot of sidewalks around schools, but we do get in a fair amount of sidewalks every year around schools. And then we also have a little bit that goes on our major roadways. But all in all, we've got all those, 17,000 lane miles. I mean, and a lot of those streets have sidewalks. A lot of them don't, but a lot of them do. And then a lot of the sidewalks are not in great shape. So it's a big struggle.
It is, and I put them on the hot seat. The other thing that we are doing, and I know Lauren mentioned, I will not even remotely try to explain it. I will leave it to probably Ian to explain. But we do have what's called a TERS. I'm not even 100% sure of the acronym, but it's essentially like it's almost kind of like a business improvement district, but not really. And so we have been working with the TERS to pull some of their money to help with the maintenance of sidewalks in parts of the city. And I will say nationally, Houston is a member of the National Association of City Transportation Officials called NACTO. And NACTO has been pushing hard at Congress. Right now, as you know, we're getting ready to do the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. And NACTO has been pushing for money specifically for sidewalks. A lot of other cities are facing the same challenge where sidewalks, either the installation and or maintenance of the sidewalk is the property owner's responsibility. So nationwide, there is a push from cities to have federal money for sidewalks, because some of the challenges is that, as you're trying to prioritize projects, it becomes hard for sidewalks just don't perform well, whether it's any type of federal money. And so it is having that program together. So, okay, next question. This is from the audience. What are some of the strategies you used for communicating the benefits of road diet, traffic calming to residents or policymakers who would rather prioritize fast auto travel? So I will say on the one hand, you know what, I'm gonna let y'all answer. Go ahead. I'll follow up to see if y'all answer correctly.
Lauren, I think this is a great one for you. We've been working on this on a lot of projects.
Yeah, sure. I feel like, this time during COVID has been a reimagining of what it means to do community engagement. And so we've sort of morphed a lot of our outreach that would be in person and allow us to do a little bit more what I feel is meaningful engagement that I think helps to have these discussions around very controversial topics. So the virtual setting is a bit different, but the concerns remain the same. And so I think it's always about trade-offs and presenting it as this is going to improve street safety. That is our goal. And talking about what that really means, what that looks like. And then saying the trade-off is that you may sit at this light for a few extra seconds or whatever that is. And we've been able, Ian can speak to this a little bit more, but we've been able to show, depending on the street, what that really looks like, what the volumes look like, how it might change. We hear a lot about, well, if you improve this street, then people are just going to cut through on my residential street. What are you going to do about that? And so being able to use data to convey, we really don't see that happening. Being transparent is really important too. I think you could throw up a ton of data and models and research, which we do, and people will still have those concerns. And so I think it's being able though to provide all of the different data and components to say these are just the trade-offs, and so what is what is most important to you, and sort of letting the community steer that decision. Ultimately, though, you know, you never reach consensus. I don't know if I believe in that word. You're never going to get everyone to agree or be completely happy. But I think that from a Vision Zero lens, nobody wants people to die or be seriously injured on our roads. We all want safety, whether somebody is yelling at you or on board with you. The message is always the same. The meeting point is, I want safety. The concerns come in when you're talking about other components. So I think it's really just showing those trade-offs up front and you know, letting the community really determine what they're.
Lauren, you're not gonna talk about our pop-up bike lanes?
Well, yeah, that's a part of it too. I think we could talk about a lot of the stuff that we're doing. Maybe I'll let you or Ian talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. We've done a number of these kind of pilot projects: roadway safety, bike lanes, intersection improvements, and some of the, you know, I think this is a very wide-ranging question, and I think it's a very good one. It's a challenge for everybody, especially as we move to prioritizing safety. We were on a call with I can't remember which NACTO city it was, but they were saying that they've moved beyond prioritizing any roads for traffic congestion. That's just not their priority anymore. It's just safety. And that seems like it should be such an easy thing to say, but when the rubber hits the road and people actually have to experience what that means, you might get some pushback. Or you'll probably get it beforehand. They'll see, you're taking lanes away or you're narrowing up this intersection. And so there's a lot of nervousness about it. And so if we can use these techniques like pop-up bike lanes, just something to go out there very quickly with cheaper materials, to show people what it'll look like, what it'll work like, so they can feel it in their communities. You know, it seems to work really, really well. In cases where there's this kind of two sides of this, because there's sometimes where there's the projects that are super easy, they should be slam dunks, we think everybody's on board, and you still have people who are not seeing eye to eye with you, and those kinds of pilot projects can be extremely useful there. It's like, you know what, we don't have to move forward with this, let's just try it and see how it works. And so we do that a lot, and we'll take comments and we'll kind of track comments over time, see how people get used to it. Sometimes we'll leave these out for weeks or months. Usually the pop-up bike lanes are usually just a day, but we have a couple other places where we're doing some intersection narrowings, and we'll kind of leave that up for a longer period of time. And you can kind of track how people's responses go. And you might find that the negative responses are spike at the beginning and they go down, and maybe your positive responses go up as people realize, hey, this might be in place for a long time, and I want to let people know that it's a good thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. Great question. Great response. So for all of you, and answer as quickly as you can, if you had a magic wand, what is one project you would like to see advance in Houston that would make a big impact? And what is preventing that project from moving forward?
I think I'll go first. Really quick, I would want to see a bigger regional network of transit. I think there is transit, but it doesn't really go where it should. I know the things that are preventing that to happen from happening is a lot. I mean, first of all, we don't have the authority over the transit. We have Metro. Also, there are several jurisdictions and agencies that come to play. There's also just the political will and the culture. It's not a transit culture. People aren't used to that. But I see that there's a lot of communities surrounding the city that if we had some regional transit systems could really help and probably reduce the need for all the driving and the highways. So if I had my magic wand, I would have swung it a long time ago.
Lauren?
Yeah, so this came up when we were developing the Vision Zero action plan, and community member was just like, I'm just gonna say it, we need to go car free. And I was like, yeah, let's just, you know, sure. But really, I think if we had more open streets that were for people walking, biking, transit, you know, a lot of our downtown, I feel like if we could make that a hub of just streets for people to walk and bike places and set up that infrastructure. I would love to see more car-free areas on a bigger scale, because, you know, we've seen other places do it and dramatically see safety improve. So if I had a magic wand, I would make some car-free places happen.
Ian?
I'm going to go the engineering boring route and say that we, you know, and actually this kind of touched on one of the questions I've seen in the Q&A. There was a question about how recent environmental events have impacted some of our efforts in the city, and maybe we can talk more specifically about that. But Houston and our Gulf Coast region is, you know, we have access to the Gulf Coast, which has pros and cons. I love going down to the beach. We have Galveston, which is a wonderful historic city that is just down the road from us. Our water's a little murky, but hey, it's a nice beach that's pretty close to us. Because of our proximity to the Gulf, we have a lot of exposure to storms, which I think y'all brought up. The winter blast, which was a little bit of an anomaly. Typically, the hurricane season is our bigger problem. And as climate change continues, and we're expecting to see more hurricanes, hey, that is definitely on our radar. So the project for me, some of our recent hurricanes or close calls have really called into question our major industrial complex that we have right near the city. This is one of those other great dichotomies of Houston, where we have a city that is very technologically savvy. We're moving in one direction, but we also have a very strong chemical industry, and that's not going anywhere. And I think it brings a lot of benefit, economic benefit to the area. And if we can do it environmentally safely, even better. We have some work to do there. But the storms have a huge risk on those industrial complexes, such that some of the last ones that we had, Harvey, I think in particular, was that where it really came up, where we had so much flooding into our ship channel. There was concern about if we had a direct strike on this industrial complex, would the Houston region even be, does it have a future? And that's, you know, I like to be more proactive and think, okay, what can we do to make the city better? But I really do think that we need something to protect our industry, to protect all the rest of us. And so I could wave that magic wand. There's a couple of different projects, and that part of the project problem is we haven't figured out the best way to solve our flooding and our hurricane problem. There's a lot of different ideas out there. So maybe the magic wand is, okay, figure out the answer and then get it in place. And I think the main thing keeping in the way is really a money issue. I think at that point, I think everybody kind of realizes this is an issue. But everybody's on board with doing something too. So I think we'll see something.
Well, if I could swish my magic wand around, I think I'd probably remove half the pavement on all of our local roads, just gone. But I don't have that type of money, so we're not going to do that. All right.
You want to do a community engagement on that first to be able to make sure the neighborhoods.
Nah, let's do it overnight. There's a really great documentary on cars versus bikes, where I think it was Brazil. There's a city in Brazil that just overnight just installed a high comfort bike lane, like no community engagement, nothing, just like did it overnight while everybody was sleeping, and it was like there. But I would not do that. Just I want the record to reflect, I would not do that. But if I had a wand, which I don't have, so. All right, we got 10 minutes left. So rapid round, one word for each of you. I'm going to start with Donald. One word to describe Houston.
I'll say gritty.
Gritty? Okay. Lauren?
Do you want me to explain, or is it just a word? Okay.
Just one word. Lauren?
Unfolding.
Wow.
Okay. Compound words, okay. Ian?
I've been thinking about this a lot. There's a lot of one words. I'm already going over one word, but I think that what I settled on is secret.
Okay.
That.
Okay. I see. Okay. Yes or no? No explanation. Can Houston become a walkable city? Lauren, yes or no?
Yes.
Donald?
No.
Ian?
Yes.
Okay.
Donald, we have to have a conversation after this.
I was gonna explain. It can't be just yes or no, but I'll explain.
Go ahead, Donald. What's your explanation?
Yes, so my explanation is no for the whole city, but yes for some enclaves. And I think the reason why I said no is that usually it's not every city that can be walkable in the sense of the word. Like just because we have folks from the other part of the country listening, Houston is hot. And walkability, yeah, walkability for should be year round if you can. But for the summer, it's really hot. I'm already thinking about coming up with a pilot project that we can discuss, something about a shade network, where we can get people outside, because with COVID, public spaces are going to be more important. The streets is going to become the destination now. People are going to leave inside leave internal spaces and go out. But then when it's hot and humid and you are sweating bullets, it's not workable in the sense of the word. So we can make it work.
I got to argue for 1 second. Donald, do you
Yeah.
like New Orleans? Do you consider New Orleans to be walkable? Because that climate is the exact same as Houston.
Yes.
And
yes.
that's a very walkable city. I love New Orleans. So what's the difference?
So it depends on what is done along the streets. So if you have a stroad, which a stroad is something that is not really a street, neither is it a road, where you have uses, but at the same time, the road is just moving people through. When you have that, you are not really enjoying your walk. So the true walkability is walking that you are enjoying. So it's not that you can't walk, but you have to enjoy the walk. You enjoy it in New Orleans because of the adjacent land uses and the scale. So if we can do that, it becomes walkable.
You know, I would argue. So one of the things about, so I think it can be walkable. So just so everyone else knows, like our downtown area is pretty much all connected by these underground like tunnels. Like, so you can be like a little ant and literally move almost all around downtown in a tunnel. And that is walkability. It's not in the walkability in the sense of being on the street, but it is walking to access food and health, because the health clinic is in the tunnel. It's, like the tunnel is like a whole, it's like Fraggle Rock. And I probably just aged myself. So for those of you that are probably too young, Fraggle Rock are these little Muppet things that live underground, and there's like this whole underground network. So that's what we do have underground in downtown, which in the summer is nice because you can get to everything you need to get to and never have to be in the elements. Okay, so we have, before we turn it back to John, what is your lasting comment you want to say? So the question is, what makes Houston totally awesome? Lauren, you first.
I think about this a lot because I actually have like a love-hate relationship with Houston. And I think it's a combination of like the three words that Ian, Donald, and I use to describe it. There are so many like really gritty secret things about Houston that you would just never imagine and that would exist here. The cultural part of Houston, the different neighborhoods, the context. I mean, they all sort of come together in this weird way to make Houston just unique, but it's like underground unique. You would just never expect it. And I really appreciate that about the city. That's why I chose to come here. It's just, there's this draw and this challenge and this like grittiness to it that I felt called to come here for, and I just think that is very rare in a city, in a major city especially.
All right, Donald.
Yes, I agree. You really can't put one definition on Houston. I think Houston has a ton of moments that you get to. So you could be in one part of the city that has a completely different character from the other one, and you can enjoy all. So it's not really highly polished, like, I don't know how to put it. It's not really something that looks extremely planned. It's something that just happens. It's almost like it's spontaneous. And as you move through, it's just, you experience different things, which I don't know any other city that gives you that. So it's a whole spectrum of experiences, and it makes it great.
All within the same block too. Ian.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. I think I'm the only one. So yeah, I'm the only one who's actually from Houston. And you know, a lot of my friends stay here. A lot of people who are from Houston live here. A lot of people move away. But I think that's probably, I don't know if that's even all that different from other cities. I mean, there's enough reasons to stay here that a lot of people do. But a lot of my coworkers at the city also are from Houston. It's kind of a mixed bag. Most of the time, we actually had there was a news opinion article written a couple of years ago about how I think it was titled, "All My Exes' Ex-Friends no longer live in Houston." All my exes are from Texas is what we say, but no, they no longer live in Texas. And you know, I think that was a very particular kind of thing. They were talking about, okay, a lot of people are moving out of town because we're not moving fast enough, and it's a dangerous town to live in if you're walking and biking, and we're working on that. I mean, yes, we're not there. It is definitely Transportation for America. We're on their list year after year, and we acknowledge that, and we're moving away from that. So with certain sectors, some people are going to find that we're not moving fast enough, but I think a lot of people who come in are surprised about what we are doing and what already exists, and the history, the culture. I mean, the amount of cool stuff we have here that we don't boast to the world. I mean, we are not a city that really goes out and says, hey, you should come here. That's kind of we don't care, because people end up here and a lot of time they stay. But we do have a lot of things that are very high quality, a high quality professional music scene, high quality art museums, and all the things you would want to go to. I think I was talking with one individual who's also from Houston, and he's like, hey, Houston's great for me, because really, what do you do if you get to that point in life? I mean, you're used to going to work, you want to go to these cool places. Houston has plenty of cool places to get to, and then you go home, you cook dinner, and you go to sleep. And he feels like he can do that. He couldn't do that anywhere else any better than in Houston. But I think, to Donald's point, we have all these different neighborhoods that have their own identities. So if one suits you better than another, hey, you can find where you want to live in Houston, I think probably better than you can in most cities.
Yeah. And so I will say, and then I'll turn it back over to John. You know, for me, I'm obviously the newest to Houston out of the bunch of us. I agree with what you all said. I also think it's an exciting time to be in Houston. It's like we're right on the cusp of becoming something different on the transportation side. And part of the reason why I chose to step into this role is because there is an elected leadership that does have the vision for something different. Because as we've talked about, you know, a lot of these things it's very challenging to do road diets. It's challenging to change how the street functions for people. And change is just hard for people. But to have elected leaders that are like, no, we can do this. And give us the go ahead to have awesome projects that serve all different types of neighborhoods. And the fact that we're actually getting some of our high comfort bike lanes in that are serving Black and Brown communities, we're often with a lot of cities, those are the communities that get the infrastructure last. And even with our partners at the county, there is definitely a focus in getting in high comfort bike lanes, and particularly in Black and Brown communities. And so I think that it's an exciting time. I think that in 10 years, we're going to look back and we are going to be a platinum bike city, and we're going to be walkable, Donald, yes, despite your naysaying. But I really, but I want to thank you all for participating in this panel. You've been awesome. You were kind of voluntold, but I appreciate you anyway for your insights and your candor. And with that, I will turn it back over to John.
Thanks, Veronica. Well, first of all, I definitely didn't have Fraggle Rock on my LiveMove event bingo card, so that was great. So I want to just say thank you to Veronica, Donald, Ian, and Lauren for sharing the work that they're doing in Houston. It's all super fascinating, and I think most of those who are watching it or will watch it in the future are mostly Northwest centric. So it's always good to get different perspectives on active mobility and planning. I will mention that this, as I said, this was recorded, and we will be getting it up onto the LiveMove YouTube page. So share it with your friends. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you who've supported us this year. especially during this weird virtual version of things, the world that we've been dealing with. And I do want to say, stay tuned for more events. There is a new leadership team coming in as most of us are graduating. So stay tuned for the work that they will be doing and more events that will be coming your way as they take over going into the 2021 and 2022 school year. So again, thank you so much for attending, and a big thank you to our panel. Round of applause if we were in person. And yeah, I'll conclude it with that. Thank you all so much.